If you want to learn how to draft a basic gown pattern, then you have found the right video. So I'm going to start by walking you through the measurements we're going to be needing. So the first measurement we're going to be needing, of course, is our shoulder width measurement. So to take our shoulder width measurement, we're going to start by measuring from one end of our shoulder to the other end. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Measure from here to the other end, right? So the next measurement we're going to be needing is our bust circumference measurement. So to take our bust circumference measurement, here's what we're going to be doing. I'll simply measure around the fullest part of my bust. I'm going to put one finger in between my body and the measuring tape, and then I'm going to make sure that behind me it's not falling, okay? So I get an accurate measurement. So the next measurement I'm going to be needing is my waist circumference measurement. And to measure my waist circumference, I want to find my true waist or my natural waist. Now, how do we find our natural waist? We simply tilt to one side. There's this part of your body that goes inside, so that is your waist. So you just measure around there, making sure you have one finger in between the tape, and that is your waist circumference measurement. So the next measurement you're going to be needing is our hip circumference measurement. So I will just simply measure around the fullest part of my bum, making sure I have one finger in between. And then I'm just going to move my measuring tape up and down just to make sure it can pass freely. And this is what we have. And that's our hip circumference measurement. Now we are going to also take our shoulder to bust measurement. And this is our shoulder to bust measurement. I'm going to be measuring from the highest point of my shoulder, somewhere below my neck here. And I'm going to be measuring all the way to the fullest part of my bust. And that's my shoulder to bust measurement. Next measurement we're going to be needing is our shoulder to front waist measurement. So to find our front waist, we would have to tie a band around our natural waist, because we're going to have to take our shoulder to front waist as well as our shoulder to back waist. I'll find my natural waist first by tilting to one side, and then I'll tie a band around it. So now I'll measure what I have from the highest point of my shoulder all the way to my true waist, which I have tied with a band. So I'll note that, and then I'll also measure my shoulder to back waist. Now to measure your shoulder to back waist, you would want to locate the bone. There's this bone on your neck, at the back of your neck, just somewhere around here. So I'll locate this bone, and then I'll measure from that bone all the way to where this band stops, and that is my shoulder to back waist. Okay, so I'm just going to untie this and keep. So the next measurement I'm going to be needing is my shoulder to hip measurement. So to do that, I'll measure from my shoulder, following the curve of my body, all the way to my hip line. Okay, and then I'll record what I have. Next measurement I'm going to be taking is my gown length measurement. So I'll just measure from my shoulder to wherever I want my gown to stop. So I'll just step back because I would like my gown to stop at the knee. So I'll measure from my shoulder all the way to my knee, and then I'll record what I have. So these are the measurements we are going to be needing. Let's jump into drafting our pattern. So the measurements we're going to be needing are our shoulder width measurement, which is 15, our shoulder to bust measurement, which is 11, our shoulder to front waist, which is 18, our shoulder to back waist, 15, our shoulder to hip, 28, our bust circumference, 38, waist circumference, 28, hip circumference, 40, and gown length, 40. So let's get to work. So as you can see on my paper, I already have some lines. I have my center front line here, and I have my top margin, which I have labeled SH. And I have another margin on this side, which I have called my CB, which is my center back. Now, if you've watched my videos on how to draft a half scale bodice block and a full scale block, you might be familiar with these lines: SH, CF, and CB. If you haven't watched the videos, however, I'm just going to link it somewhere here up and also in the description so you can go watch it. But if you haven't, I'm still going to explain how I got these lines. So I have my measuring tape, of course, and I have my ruler, and I have my different curves, here. I have my pencils, I have my marker, I have my paper scissors. So this top line, I did not use any particular measurement to get this line. I just it's just a starting point. But this space here is about an inch, so you could just use your discretion to know where to draw the line. Then for this line, I also did not use any measurement in particular, but I left about 2 inches space here, and I call this my CB, or my center back. Then to get this CF line, what I did was I took my largest measurement, which in this case is my hip circumference measurement, which is 40. I went ahead to divide it by 2. I got 20, then I added 2 inches to it, and that was how I got the space from here to this other line. So I measured 20 plus 2 from here, from my CB here, all the way to this end, and I marked it on different points on this side of my paper, and then I drew a line which I called my CF. So I have other lines here too. So just down here I have a line I have called FGL, which is my front gown length. So this is basically the length of my gown, which I have explained to you earlier, which is 40. So I simply measured from my shoulder here, this shoulder line, or this starting point line, downwards. I measured 40 inches and I marked it, and then I drew the line, and that was my front gown length line. So I've also marked here on the other side of the paper, I've marked BGL, I've labeled it BGL, and this is my back gown length. So my front gown length and my back gown length are different, and the reason is because, of course, we tend to have more length in front because we have bust in front of our body. So the difference between my front and my back is basically the same difference between my front waist and my back waist, which was 3 inches when I subtracted. So I used the same 3 inches. I subtracted 3 from my gown length, which was 40 inches, and I got 37. And that was how I got my back gown length. So we're just going to go into drafting our pattern. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be marking my neck width and neck depth. I'll start with the back. So from my CB, the neck width for my back side of my bodice is going to be 3 inches, just like it was in the other 2 patterns we've drafted already. So our back neck width is going to be 3, and the depth is going to be 1 inch. So I'll just do that so you can see. So the depth is going to be 1 inch. So I'm just going to mark 1 inch here, and the width is going to be 3 inches. So I'm marking 3 inches here. So now I'm just going to draw a curve for my back neck. That's my back neck. I'm just going to highlight it. So next we're going to be marking our front neck. So for our front neck, the width we're going to be using is 3 inches, and the depth is going to be 3 inches. I'll just go ahead and mark 3 inches here. 3 inches width and 3 inches depth. So now I'm just going to pick up a curve that works for me. So that's my front neck. So the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to mark my shoulder width. Now to mark my shoulder width, I would have to divide this by 2. So my shoulder width is 15 and 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. So I'm going to be marking 7.5 on this starting point line, this top line here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with my back and the back side of my bodice. So I'm going to be measuring from the CB this way. So this is it. Also, on the front side of my bodice, I'm going to also mark 7.5. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be marking my back and front shoulder slope. So the shoulder slope for the back is 1 inch. So I'm going to be measuring 1 inch from here downwards. From this point where I marked my shoulder width measurement, I'll be measuring 1 inch downwards. So this is 1 inch. So also for the front, I'm also going to be marking the shoulder slope for the front. However, the shoulder slope for the front is 1.5 of an inch. So this is what we have. I'll be measuring 1.5 inch downwards like this. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be connecting from the neck, from the side of the neck. I'm starting with the back neck, of course. So I'm going to be connecting from the side of the back neck to the shoulder slope of 1 inch for the back. So I'll just do this. So I'm also going to be marking the front shoulder slope. That is from the side of the front neck to this 1.5 inch mark here. And that is the front shoulder slope. So the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be marking the armhole for the back. So we're going to be starting with the back. So to get our armhole length, what we're going to do is we're going to take our bust, divide by 6 and add 1.5. So bust divided by 6 plus 1.5. So in this case, my bust is 38 divided by 6 plus 1.5, and that gave me 7.8. So I'm just going to mark that here. I'm going to be marking it on the back armhole, not on the front. So I'm going to mark it on the back here. I'll mark 7.8. So now I'm going to draw a line to connect from this shoulder slope to this armhole, this length of my armhole here. So that's my armhole length for the back. Now to get my armhole for the front, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to measure what I have starting from this place. Okay, from this place all the way to the length of my armhole for the back. So let me measure what I have. So I have 8.8. So I'm just going to take that measurement and bring it here. So I'll just mark 8.8 here. And then I'll draw a line from my front shoulder slope to that point. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line underneath these two armhole lines. So now I have this line. I'm going to call it my chest line. Okay, so I'll just label it CH. So now I'm going to do my armhole curve. I'll be starting with my back armhole curve. So to do my back armhole curve, I'll simply measure the midpoint of my back armhole. So here's what I'll do. Measure what I have on my back armhole, and then I'll fold my tip into two. Fold it into two. Note the folded part, and then mark that folded part on the armhole line. Yeah, so this is the midpoint of my back armhole. So now on this midpoint, I'm going to come in this way by half of an inch. So this is half of an inch. So now I'm going to use any of my curves that works for me, and I'm going to make a curve from here to touch this midpoint and all the way to the base of my armhole. Yeah, so that's my front arm, my back armhole. So we're also going to do our front armhole, and to do our front armhole curve, we would also have to find the midpoint of our front armhole. So I'll simply measure what I have on my front armhole, and then I'll fold my tape measure into two, and then mark the midpoint, which is here. So now I'm going to be coming in here by 0.75, not half of an inch, but 0.75 or 3/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to mark that here, and I'm also going to curve it. Yeah, so that's our front armhole curve. So now we're going to be marking our shoulder to bust measurement, and our shoulder to bust in this case is 11 inches. So I'm going to be measuring 11 inches from my top line, and I'm going to be marking this measurement on the front side of my bodice. So I'm going to be marking it on this side. So I'll measure 11 inches here. Then I'm going to rule a line across. Next thing I'm going to be marking is my shoulder to front waist measurement, and I'm also going to be marking this on the front side of my bodice. So my shoulder to front waist measurement is 18 inches. So I'll be marking 18 inches from this top line also. So I have 18 inches here, and I'm going to rule a line across. So I'm just going to label these lines. I'll call this one bust line, or BL, and I'll call this front waist line, or FWL. Okay, so next I'm going to be marking my shoulder to back waist length, and I'm also going to be measuring this from the top. So my shoulder to back waist is 15 inches, so I'll just mark 15 inches here, and I'll go ahead to rule a line across. Next, I'm going to be marking my shoulder to hip measurement. So my shoulder to hip measurement for the front is 28. So shoulder to hip for the front is 28, so I'll be measuring 28 from the top here. Downwards. So I'll really line across. So next I'm going to be marking my shoulder to back hip length, my shoulder to back hip measurement. So to get that, I would simply subtract 3 inches from my shoulder to front hip measurement. So the reason why I'm doing that is because 3 inches is the difference between my front waist and front shoulder to waist measurement and back shoulder to waist. My front shoulder to waist is 18 and my front shoulder to waist is 15. So when I subtract, I got 3 inches. So I'll be using that to get my back. I'll also be using that 3 inches to get my back shoulder to hip measurement. I hope it makes sense. So if the difference between your front shoulder to waist and back shoulder to waist is 2 inches, then you'll be subtracting 2 inches, okay, to get your back shoulder to hip measurement, and also your back shoulder to gown length measurement, okay. So whatever the difference between your front shoulder to waist and back shoulder to waist, that is the difference you'll be using to get your back shoulder to hip as well as your back shoulder to gown length. I hope it makes sense. So now to get my back shoulder to hip, I simply subtracted 3 inches from 28. 28 is my front shoulder to hip measurement. So that gave me 25. So I'm just going to mark 25 at the back here. So this is 25. Okay, so really line across. So we're going to call this our hip line, back hip line. I'll just label it back hip line, and this is our front hip line. Okay, so now we are going to do our darts. Now to do our darts, we would need to determine our bust span measurement. Now to determine our bust span measurement, the calculation we'll be using is our bust divided by 4 minus 1.5. So when I did that for my bust divided by 4 minus 1.5 gave me 8 inches. Now to get the measurement I'll be using for my darts, I'm going to take my bust span and then I'll divide it by 2. So let's start with the front. So my bust span being 8 divided by 2 gave me 4 inches. So I'm going to measure 4 inches. I'm going to be putting that on my front bust line, okay? So I'm going to be measuring 4 inches away from my CF. So this is it. I will mark 4 inches here. Also on my front waistline, I'm also going to mark 4 inches. And also on my front hip line, I would mark 4 inches as well. So now I'm going to draw a line to connect these 3 points. So now, to do my darts for the front, what I'm going to have to do is I would come down on this my bust. This now is my bust point, so I'm going to come down by 1 inch. So I'll be marking 1 inch downwards. So on my front waistline, I'm going to be moving away on each side by 0.75. I'll move away on this side by 0.75 and I'll move away on this side by 0.75. Note that you could use as little as 0.5 of an inch. You could even use as much as 1 inch, but I like to use 0.75 because it works for me. So I'm just going to mark that here. I'm marking 0.75 on this side and 0.75 on the other side. So on my hip line, I'll be coming up by 2 inches. So I'll come up here by 2 inches, and I'm just going to mark that. Okay. So now I'm going to be connecting these 3 points. This this point where I came up by 2 inches, these 2 points where I moved away by 0.75, and this point where I came down by 1 inch. So I'm going to connect these 4 points together, and that will be my front darts. So that's my front darts. So we're going to do our back darts next. So for our back darts, we're going to be starting on the chest line, not because obviously we do not have a bust line on the back side of our bodies. So we're going to be starting on the chest line. So on the chest line, I would mark 4 inches away from my CB and my center back. So I'll mark 4 inches here. I'll also mark 4 inches here on my back waistline. I forgot to label this, so I'll just label it now. So this is my back waistline. Okay, so I'll mark 4 inches away from my center back, and then I will also mark on my back hip line. I would also mark 4 inches. So now I'm just going to connect these 3 lines, 1, 2, 3. So now to make my darts on this back waistline, I'm going to be moving away by half of an inch on both sides. So I've got half of an inch here and half of an inch on this side. Then on the back hip line also, I'm also going to be coming up by 2 inches. So here we have 2 inches. So I'm going to connect these 4 points, just like I did for the front. Okay, so this is our back dart. So next we're going to be doing our back tightening. So for our back tightening, I'm just going to trace this midpoint of my back armhole. I'm just going to trace it on this other side on this line, this CB line. If you have watched my videos on how to draft a half scale bodice and how to draft a full scale bodice, then you would have noticed that I measured 3 inches or 4 inches from this back neck, from here on my back neck, to get this point. However, if you do not want to do any of that, or you're not sure whether to use 3 or 4 inches, you can just trace this line, measure what you have from here to here, and transfer it here, or just use your ruler to trace what you have, the point, and just trace it on this other side. Okay, so now we marked that point, and then we'll come on our back waistline. Okay, on this back waistline, I'm going to be moving in by 1 inch. You could use half of an inch if you like, but I like to use 1 inch. So I'm just going to move in here by 1 inch, and I'll mark it here. And also on this back hip line, I'll be coming up by 2 inches. So I'll come up by 2 inches here, and I would mark this point. So now I'm going to connect these 3 points, 1, 2, and 3. So now we have contoured our back, and from this point, this is a line that would matter on our back. This is our new center back. This is no longer our center back, but this right here is our new center back. So now the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be imputing our measurements on this pattern. So to impute our measurements, first we're going to start with our bust measurements. And to impute our bust measurements, we take our bust measurements, divide it by 4. So bust 38 divided by 4 would give us 9.5. So let me impute that at the back. So to impute that at the back, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be marking that on the chest line, okay? And then I'm going to be starting from this new center back line. So I'll measure 9.5 this way. Next, I'm going to be marking my waist circumference measurement, and to impute that, I'm going to be dividing my waist divided by 4, which is 28 divided by 4, and that is 7. So if you've watched my previous videos, you would see how I impute my measurements when a dart cuts through. So this is what I do. Of course, starting my measurement from this new center back line, I would measure all the way to where my dart begins. And then I'll hold that point, note that point, hold it, and take my tape, lift my tape and take it to where the dart ends, and then I'll continue my measurements, okay? And then I'll mark 7 here. Alternatively, what you could do is you could just mark 7 inches, measure 7 inches where you have it, mark where you have it here, okay? Then you add the 1 inch which you used for your dart, okay? You add it here, add it after the 7-inch mark, and then you have your measurement. So the next measurement I'm going to be imputing is my hip circumference measurement, and I'm also going to be dividing that by 4. So to divide my hip circumference measurement by 4, that will be 40 divided by 4, and that is 10 inches. So I'll mark it from here, from this center back line. And here we have 10 inches. Okay. So now we're going to need to contour our back. And this is to give the back area more fitting, the down part of our back of our gown. So how do we contour? To contour the down part of our gown, we will simply come to this gown length line, okay, and then we'll go in by 1 inch. So I'll be going in here by 1 inch from the center back. So I'm going to mark 1 inch here from the center back, and then I'm going to connect from my hip, from this point where my hip line cuts the center back line. I'm going to connect to this 1 inch back. So I'll just show you. So you can see it gives a really nice curve at the back, okay, and it helps to highlight your bum, the bum area. So you have to contour the down part of your gown just on this gown length line. You come in by 1 inch and connect it back to your hip line, okay? So now we're going to connect the points where we marked our bust measurements, our waist measurements, our hip measurements. So this is what we'll do. I'll use a straight ruler to connect from the bust to the waist, and then making use of my hip curve ruler, I'll connect to where I marked my hip. And now I'll use a straight ruler to just mark downwards. Yeah, and that's it for the back side. So for the front, we're also going to be imputing our measurements. So we're also going to divide our bust by 4. That is 38 by 4, and that is 9.5. And I'm also going to be marking it on the chest line, not on the bust line. Please take note. So we'll mark our bust measurements on our chest line, and 38 divided by 4 is 9.5. So I'll just mark 9.5 here. Also for the waist, I'll divide 28 by 4, and that's 7. So I'm just going to mark 7 here. Okay, I'm just teaching you another method of imputing your measurements when there's a dart that cuts through. So I'll mark 7 here, but we're also going to have to add this dart. So this dart is about 1.5 inches. So this is 1.5. So I'll add the 1.5 here after the mark I made last. So I'll add 1.5 here. Okay, then on our hip line, our hip measurement is 40. 40 divided by 4 is 10. So we have 10 here. I'm going to mark 10 here. So I'll just connect with my ruler. And then I'll use my hip curve ruler for this other part. And I'll use my ruler to complete it by drawing a straight line all the way down. Okay, so here this is a straight gown basically. So if you want this to be like a pencil gown, you can just go in here by 2 inches on this hemline or the gown length line. You can come in here by 2 inches. I'll just do that and mark it with a broken line just so you can see. So you can just come in here by 2 inches, mark that here, and then can connect it back. So that's what you could do if you're trying to achieve a pencil gown. So basically this is our pattern. So this is our the back side of our pattern, and this is the front side. Okay, so next thing we're going to be doing now is our bust dart. So to do our bust dart, we are going to take the difference between our front and our back waist, which is 3 inches, and we're going to mark that here at this point where the bust line cuts through the side line. So I'll just measure 3 inches downwards, and I'm going to mark that here. So I'll connect this all the way to my bust point. So that's it for our basic gown pattern. So here we have our back panel and we have our front panel here. Now I know you're probably wondering how we're going to make the sides equal, because obviously the side of our front is longer than the side of our back panel. So in order to make the length of the side front and the length of the side back equal, what we would have to do is that we'll need to close up this bust dart. Now if you want to know how to close up this side bust dart, you can simply watch one of my videos, either my video on how to draft a half scale bodice or a full scale bodice. I'm just going to link it somewhere up and also in the description so you can go watch it, and then you would know how to close up this dart so that the side of your front and the side of your back can be equal.